Plus, only 4 out of 10 crimes in London are reported to police because victims simply don't trust that criminals will be charged or convicted. That's according to analysis of Met Police figures. All that, plenty more coming up to be discussed with my guest joining me this morning. I'm delighted to say former Labour Party advisor Matthew Laza. Morning once again to you.
Good morning again.
We keep explaining this Afghanistan story because it is so complicated.
Absolutely. You
can't really have a view on it until you understand it. So I'm just going to very briefly just go over it for those of you who just sort of getting on top of it. Bearing in mind, this story came out at midday yesterday. We were on air and we were sort of looking at the figures going, what? I mean, 7 billion quid of your and my money and no one thought we had a right to know about it. Thousands of lives at risk. No, nothing to see here. 2021. Taliban took back over in Afghanistan. 2022, there was this data leak. The MOD didn't know about it. Some idiot at the MOD writing an email to 100 people accidentally just put, almost 19,000 people's names and info into that email. They didn't even know there had been that data leak until over a year later in 2023. They found out because someone put some of the info on Facebook, basically threatened to put more of it out to the Taliban. Initially, there was what's called a D notice, and this is basically for national security, you can't report it. I think we'll all understand that, where you're trying to save people's lives. And then a super injunction was opposed by the court. And that means not just that we're not allowed to know the details of the data breach, we're not even allowed to know that there has been an injunction. We're not even allowed to know that the injunction even exists. So I think it was the Mail and the Times were both pushing this and trying to get it overturned. And yesterday it was overturned after 23 months, so almost 2 years, that super injunction was lifted. John Healey, the Defence Secretary, made a statement in the House of Commons talking about why this had happened. He's apologised on behalf of the British government. Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, as was at the time, has been on the airwaves and in newspapers defending it. We've just spoken to Michael Gove, who was a senior figure in that government. He was aware of the super injunction. He defends it. There was a cover-up just of the data leak. There was a cover-up of the bid to get people back to this country. The huge cost, thousands of people brought into this country that we weren't told about. Huge costs it involved. Many people still left behind. The £7 billion figure, extraordinary. £1 billion looks like it might be spent on legal costs for people who are suing, who were on that list, who were put at risk. The story is exploding. People are very angry, understandably. But Matthew Laza, I mean, it's difficult to sort of narrow down which bit of this is the worst bit, isn't it?
Absolutely. Maybe we'll only be able to make that judgment when more facts emerge, because although, as you said, it's a complicated story, I think it's going to get more complicated yet when we find out who did what when and exactly what the final figure will be.
And that's the thing. The court heard the figure £7 billion repeatedly. It was in court constantly, OK? And now they're saying, no, it's going to be up to maybe 850 million. And then there'll be £1 billion on these court costs. Well, where's the £7 billion from then? No, they didn't bring everyone over here, but are they talking about the potential of, like, if you bring someone over here, I mean, some of these people might speak English, some not, maybe don't have skills they can translate here, they've got a family, they've got 6 kids. I mean, a lot of people, Afghanistan families are very, very large. We're supporting them in a council house or, again, 1 in 10 numbers, people on the homeless list, eligible. They won't have family members here they can stay with, so eligible for housing that would otherwise have gone to British people. There is a reality there that the High Court judge and the government ministers and the people who work at the MOD don't deal with that reality because they're not living in that world where they are competing for these scarce resources with people like these Afghan arrivals. All these different costs, like it could be over many years. And British people have never been asked if we're happy to do that, if it was the right thing to do. There's been no scrutiny by MPs, not even by the sort of, Joint Intelligence Committee. There are committees in the Commons where there are senior figures on those committees who are bound to secrecy. They don't discuss it, but they provide some scrutiny, at least, of government action. And there's been none of that.
Absolutely nobody was allowed to scrutinise it at all. Nobody was allowed to know about it by the very nature of the super injunction. I think the £7 billion figure would have come from if everybody on the list had come. And I think one of the things that John Healey, the Labour Defence Secretary, would say is that they have actually, effectively gone through the list, worked out who was most at risk on the list, and therefore said that a lot of people on that list can't come.
So
I don't
we're
quite
not
know
gonna
why
pay
we're not going to pay for that. Quite why it was left for 2 years until Labour came in to do that, I don't understand.
No, and that's the thing, because I mean, Michael Gove earlier on, Lord Gove said it was vitally important. It was about safety. The whole thing is regrettable, but he said yes, it was right. There was a blackout, and I do accept that there should be a blackout for a few months, but they didn't contact everyone on the list. They didn't get everybody out. The idea that you need a news blackout for all those years is frankly tosh.
And the idea the Taliban didn't have the list is absolute tosh. As the Taliban's been telling us this morning, they had it all along.
Also,
they're laughing all the way.
Also, by the way, everyone knows everyone in these sort of towns and villages. I mean, come on. The idea that, you know, someone who's working with the British, the idea that people wouldn't know that.
It was a
that
secret.
I mean, I'm sorry. This is a load of nonsense. A lot of these people were already at risk. But, I mean, Michael Gove basically saying is absolutely the right thing to do. And he's saying, look, if you object to the cost, you object to the billions, whatever it's going to end up being, but realistically, best part of 2 billion in your best case scenario, okay? If it's going to end up costing that, like, if you object to that, are you saying that those people shouldn't have been brought here? So it's one or the other. He says it's either the cost, you can either spend that money, or you could just say, no, we're quite happy for people who help the British forces, Afghanistan soldiers to be left there.
Well, I think it's exactly what you just said, which is lots of people in Afghanistan help British forces. Lots of people in Afghanistan know who they are because they're in their communities. And so what he's basically saying is, if you don't agree to a total blank cheque, you want these people to be die basically.
Yeah.
And that's an extraordinarily reductive argument, because clearly not every single person who ever did anything, who ever peeled a potato for the British forces, is ever going to be allowed into Britain. And it's this blank cheque argument. We saw it over COVID, isn't it?
And if that were the case, then we would have brought more people over than we did anyway, because lots of people were left. But also this idea they were fighting for us. No, they weren't. These were Afghanistan people in lots of cases who were in Afghanistan fighting for their own country. I'm not entirely sure. And it's like, again, with that Ukraine, we had women and children in, and people have been very welcoming of that, for that to come to safety, although many have now gone home because it's not been the sort of total war that many had thought it was, and it was in the early months. But what are we saying? So if Russia ends up winning more territory in Ukraine, are we just going to say, well, every Ukrainian gets to come here? I mean, that's not going to fly with most people. And as one of our callers pointed out earlier, do these people all have to come here? Or I mean, we know a lot of people making their way to Pakistan, and Pakistanis might say, well, we don't want these people. But I mean, the reality is, if Ireland was invaded, we'd have the Irish people here. If that is the reality. It's neighbouring countries that often bear the brunt.
Well, I think one thing is the Taliban, I think, probably didn't do anything with the list that they had, because they can do a screen capture off Facebook. Because of course, what it's doing is it's getting rid of the people who might stand up to the Taliban, who would be their opponents, pushing them out of the country. Yeah. So in fact, they're laughing.
Yeah, I have to say, none of it adds up. And again, I think we've been lied to too many times by this government, the last government, all governments. We know that actually so much of these things tends to be about covering backsides, covering reputations, and less about doing the right thing. I simply don't trust a lot of the explanations here.
Not one head has rolled, including the original person who sent the email, the people who you kind of didn't put checks and balances in place to stop that, etc. We're just told that the person who sent the email is now no longer dealing with Afghanistan.
He's just putting other people's lives at risk. I mean, but genuinely, Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, is a very popular figure, in the last government, really, really popular with Tory members and the public at large. Very, very highly respected Defence Secretary. But he was on the radio this morning, and he's basically saying, it was the right thing to do. He stands by it, and absolutely he's defending this person still working in the MOD. But he said, he didn't apply for the super injunction. So who did?
Who knew what when? Yeah. And what we're having this morning is every former Tory minister putting rushing onto the airwaves or into print to say, not me, Gov. Yeah. Well, then who was it?
Absolutely, absolutely. Look, so much more I want to talk about. Let's talk about inflation, 3.6%. For an awful lot of people, again, it's the economy, stupid. That's the issue in elections. Immigration, a massive issue, culture wars, NHS and all of that. And we get to all those topics most days. But inflation, the experts... they get it wrong every time, but they predicted it to be less, or stay around the 3.4% it was last month. But for June, it hit 3.6%. And this is the reality, is that since 2020, 2021, we have seen prices go up by 25%. They've gone up. Things are a quarter more expensive than they used to be, and they're still going up. So even though we don't have 11% inflation anymore. We've still got 3.6%. It's going in the wrong direction. The target for the Bank of England is 2%. This means they're unlikely to sort of speed up cutting those interest rates and at the same time we're facing, let's face it, massive tax rises under the Chancellor Rachel Reeves. Whatever she says about trying to boost growth and business, it's going to be tax rises because this government refuses to cut anything.
Well, you'll also have the issue of public sector pay awards. We've seen with the resident doctors, I mustn't call them junior doctors, the resident doctors just in the last few days. Any increase in inflation gives fuel to the mill, grist to the mill for the unions who are pushing for higher pay rises.
Where do you stand on that? Wes Streeting has said it's outrageous, it's unconscionable. But didn't he walk into that here you go, here's your 22% last summer?
I think something had to be done in terms of they had fallen too far behind, but I think it's absolutely right to hold the line now. We've seen public support. I wonder if actually that they're going to realise that the time is running out on their demands.
Only a third of all resident doctors actually voted for this. What do you make of the hypocrisy of the Labour government saying, oh, you only had 55% of people who were members of the BMA who voted for this. It was 90% yes, but only 55% voters, only just over half. When the government is currently bringing in a law, and it's in the House of Lords at the moment under Angela Rayner, which is an employment rights bill, which will scrap that Tory law, which basically said if you're going to have a vote to go on strike, you're going to have at least 50% of members taking part in the vote. That's your bare minimum. And they're going to scrap that.
I think it's very hard for politicians to impose a minimum turnout on an election because, as we've seen, Labour won with a third of the vote from.
No, there was a turnout of over 50%.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's not the thing that worries me most about.
They were elected fair and square
in the employment rights bill. I'm glad that some of the more outre edges have been toned down.
Such as?
Well, the right to completely switch off has gone. There are other things that the Treasury have managed to.
What about people having rights from day one? I mean, they're now talking. There are people campaigning. That if your child is sick, you're grieving for a miscarriage, you're grieving for a relative. I mean, let's just pay everyone every single day if they stub their toenail.
I think you've got to get the balance right, and I hope that the Employment Rights Act will do that. There are things like I think it's right that people who've had a miscarriage are given time off, for instance. But obviously, if you've got a stub toe, no, and therefore you have to get the balance between the employer and the employee, right? And especially in a world of work, it's changed with more people working from home, etc. You need to get that right.
Well, again, I think it's a balance, but again, the government giving a lot of rights to people which they don't end up paying for. The government doesn't pay for it, it's the employer that pays for it, and then saying get rid of. Last night we had Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, talking about how red tape is the boot on the neck of businesses. Yeah, and she's adding more employment rights. And again, I think Labour has this really, really strange idea that employers are bad, evil people, like landlords, bad, evil people, and people who rent are all wonderful, lovely souls, and every employee is a victim of their evil boss. They're in the sort of dark satanic mills, people being sort of whipped, I mean, that's not the relationship most people have with their bosses.
I think there's a bit of that tied into sort of Labour DNA, because actually literally the party came out of traditional Victorian industry, like the cotton mills where I'm from in Lancashire. But no, I think
came from the cotton mills?
Absolutely, and the coal mines. No, I'm not going to.
He's in a little basket in a coal mill.
Not quite. My dad did leave school at 14 to be a docker, but what I mean is that that is kind of a bit hardwired into how Labour thinks. I think it's right that the Employment Rights Bill comes in, but it's got to realise that we're not in the grad grind era of mill owners. We're in a world where a lot of people work in small and medium-sized enterprises, which is the lifeblood of the economy, you can't overburden them.
I think we need to give employers more rights. I think it's really bizarre that most employees now, particularly young people, seem to think that they can dictate where they work, how long they work, and what they do, and how they're spoken to and everything in an office. If you don't like it, go and get another job. And by the way, you're not going on the dole. But apparently they are. What do you make of these figures? Almost half of people claiming universal credit, which is the main working age benefit, are not required to look for work. So we've got 7.9 million people. So you've got basically 8 million people in this country are claiming universal credit. Only 2.2 million of those are actually in work. So the majority of them are either not required to look for work, that's 3.5 million, and then 1.5 million roughly are saying they're searching for work, and another 500,000 are preparing for work. I mean, this is an absolute nonsense. If you want a job, there are jobs. Now, there's a difference between someone like they've left a particular industry and they're looking for something similar or they're retraining. I get that. That's not the case. There are a lot of people who are just going, well, I'm waiting for the right job. Yeah, well, I'm waiting for the right taxes that mean I don't pay for you while you're looking for a job. You can look for a job while you've already got a job. Go and do whatever you need to do. If I had to clean toilets, sweep the streets, put food on the table for my family, I would do that, and I would not be embarrassed or ashamed, and no one should, from doing honest hard work. But the idea that you could just go on benefits and not even be required to look for work. They're on universal credit. Why are they not looking for work?
So I think one of the issues with universal credit, which wrapped loads of different benefits together into one benefit, and you've got different elements of it depending on your circumstances, means that it's much harder to actually see what's going on because everybody's on universal credit. Yeah. So wrapped up in those figures, the 1.6 million, what we used to just say were on the dole. They're people who are claiming the unemployment benefit part of universal credit, but required to look for work as they have been historically. The rest includes people who have got severe disabilities and might not be able to work, and a lot of people who haven't.
Or a food intolerance, we've learned this week.
Look, and we've seen, and you put it to Michael, we've seen a doubling of people between the pandemic, which ended now, 4 years ago. Between the ending of the pandemic and now, we've seen a doubling of people who are claiming basically sickness benefits, and most of that is young people, and most of that is for mental health conditions. It's not good for the economy, and it's not good for those people.
Your party won't actually stand up to that.
I think
the Tories allowed it to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. The Tories allowed it to happen. My party, the pressure, they got into a mess on it. It's not dead. It's not even in the deep freeze. There is a review going on under one of the ministers, Stephen Timms, and I hope it comes back with a set of proposals that can get more support, but realise that this is unsustainable, not just for the economy and the taxpayer, but for the people
you guys
on it.
Are not going to get to grips with this. Is going to be another one of the big crises. And again, people only put up with their taxes going up so much. There's an explanation by why we are seeing such low approval figures for this government. Just finally, I want to talk about MasterChef. We talked about this so much this week. So MasterChef star Jon Torode sacked over this comment he made in either 2018 or 2019. No one can actually remember when. I mean, that's an extraordinary thing anyway. A comment that he made using apparently an unacceptable racial slur, not used maliciously, not as a term of abuse, but used it, said it. I've read that, may have been in a song or something. So again, he could have been singing, Gold Digger, and sang the next lyric, she ain't dating any. Now, this is madness, okay? This is absolutely crazy. If someone is walking around being racially abusive to people, absolutely out on your ear. First warning, second warning, out, end of, nothing to discuss. No one's accusing him of that. Now, by all accounts, we've heard that he was frankly pretty difficult to work with. Well, aren't a lot of these big stars. But, Gregg Wallace, allegations against him, lots of them, the touching ones have actually been, thrown out, but inappropriate, showing his genitals to people. I mean, just, general just misbehaviour. A lot of it a long time ago. And again, this report, you don't get all the details. A lot of things happening a long time ago, and his behaviour's massively changed since 2018, we are told. And yet, he's lost his job. Now Jon Torode as well. Is this the BBC doing the right thing, or is this the BBC basically operating a scorched earth policy? Get rid of all of them. Let's protect the boys at the top of the BBC, boys and girls at the top of the BBC, and throw everyone else under the bus.
I think they wanted to relaunch the programme, and therefore, you had to have an excuse to get rid of him. And it seems to me, of Jon Torode, it seems to me that they've sort of dug out this. It's effectively the bants police, the sort of banter police, which is one of the things that people worried about. I think that has been toned down in the Employment Rights Bill. That pub staff are going to have to overhear banter.
I love you're laughing. This is your lot.
Well, I'm glad that has gone. It was. I've one simple solution for MasterChef: bring back Lloyd Grossman. Who was the original presenter of MasterChef in the 80s and early 90s. That's the solution. Bring back Lloyd Grossman.
Is he still?
No, he's very much there.
I don't know. I was just thinking in my head. I'm thinking in my head.
He was the advisor to the government on meals and things.
Lloyd, there's a job for you apparently, but you need to start spelling your name right. Anyway, Matthew Laza, thank you very much.